Are you preparing for your first Taekwondo competition? Here's everything you need to know.
Everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday. So this is going to be how to prepare for your first Taekwondo competition. So that can be very exciting, but also a nerve-wracking experience. But with the right preparation, you can increase the chances of success. And in this video, we're going to show you everything that you need to prepare for your first competition. And this also includes whether it's your first, maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4, because you don't become an expert at this just from competing once. So we're going to go through some of the things that you're really going to need to put you on the right track to make sure that it's a positive experience and you want to go and compete again.
Yeah, and I suppose the very, very first thing that we need to consider when you're looking at getting to your first Taekwondo competition is, do you actually understand the rules of the game, what you're expected to do when you get there? So for most people with their first competition, they're probably going to be focusing on their pattern and their sparring competition. So let's just start with the patterns. What are you going to have to do? You need to know, are you going to be lining up 2 by 2? So 2 people at a time, as you can see on screen here, competing in pattern one against the other. You need to know who's going to be red and who's going to be blue and how you're going to know that. And usually it's very, very simple. The first name called will be red. The second name called will be blue. When you get onto the floor, most often, if it's your first competition, it's probably going to be one optional pattern. So you're going to have a pattern that you've prepared in advance and that you're ready to perform for the judges. And it's going to be that same pattern round after round after round. In some competitions, they might designate or tell you what the pattern is going to be, but you'll usually know that in advance. Richie, in terms of the scoring of patterns, do you think there's anything that people especially need to know before their first competition?
Yeah, for your first competition, you don't have to worry too much about the scoring. The big thing that you want to do is make sure that you understand that your pattern, what you need to have technically, that's going to be the biggest factor. Of course, the scoring is going to come down to your technical ability, but also other things such as power, your rhythm, or the speed of the pattern, let's say. And these are things that you need to be aware of to make sure you put yourself in the right driving seat, so you don't go too quick, you don't make too many mistakes, or maybe you lose out because you're not powerful enough. So being aware of these things are very, very important for the pattern side. When we look at the sparring side, then one of the first things you want to know is the time limit of the match, and that will come into one of the things we have next of preparing for that correctly. And also, it's a good idea to be aware of the scoring system. What are the points for? What kind of a system does the competition have? Is it 2 points for a body kick like we have, 3 points for a head kick, 1 point for a punch? Or is there a different system? Because that will come into play. Also, it's good to know what happens if there's a draw or any circumstances that might come up like that are not always straightforward. Anything else, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, I think the next thing on that is just being really, really conscious of your actions that could lead to warnings or to fouls. So you need to know what the warnings are, so that you're not accidentally or inadvertently giving away scores to your opponent. So generally speaking, staying within the boundaries of the ring and knowing what size the ring is going to be, staying within the boundaries, not falling over, throwing techniques that are going to have you losing your balance, and avoiding kicking or hitting to the illegal targets in your opponent's body. So typically anything below the belt or anything to the back or back of the head, we're not hitting there. So avoiding those will mean you're staying out of the referee's attention when it comes to the warnings and fouls, and you'll keep all of your scores.
Yeah, and for us, as you see from the video here, in our competitions in Ireland in the ITA, we also have a full scoring system, which if that is available at the competition, it's a good idea to get used to that, what it looks like. My advice is, when you go to the competition, maybe look at a couple of matches before yours if possible, and try to figure out what's going on the scoreboard, how the warnings impact the score, how the scores are given, and what the scoreboard looks like as a visual, so you can understand pretty quickly what you need to take in terms of information to understand the time that you have left and the score, and what you need to do if you're winning and what you need to do if you're behind on the scorecards. That's going to help you very much so, in particularly with sparring.
Yeah, and there's no shortcut to getting good at reading the board. You have to be in there and experience it and get used to picking out that information as you go. And the big thing that'll help with that is developing a relationship where you can listen to and hear your coach, and the coach should be the one that's giving you the feedback on those kind of things. And with that, Just staying relaxed enough that you can still hear the coach and respond to directions will really, really help there.
Yeah, make sure you know what side you're on too. Are you red or are you blue? You don't want to get that mixed up. Make sure you're very clear what color or what side you are.
I think that's happened to all of us at some stage. You go in there, you look down, your glove is red, but it happens to be, particularly for a lot of people in their first competitions, they're not going to own a full set of red and blue sparring gear. It might not always match the colour on the board, so often there will be vests or tags put on the belt, or there'll be a different way of indicating the colour of the competitor for the scoring. And yeah, we've all gotten that one confused from time to time. So, if it's hard for you when you're the person in the ring, it's certainly hard for the judges. As soon as you possibly can in your sparring career, I'd suggest at least getting 2 helmets so that you can wear the correct coloured helmet and make it a little bit easier on the judges to pick out the right competitor.
All right, what do we have next for when you're preparing for your first competition?
Yeah, I suppose it's really, really critical to be consistent in your training in the lead up to the competition, all along anyway, but certainly in the lead up to the competition. Some consistency is really, really required, and you'll find that your club generally has their training adapted to suit the calendar of competitions. So in the weeks before the competition is probably when you'll start to really dial in on those pattern performances, start to bring your sparring intensity and the duration of the bouts up to what you'll experience in the next competition that you're going. And so you don't want to be inconsistent in your training in that last period in particular coming up to a competition.
Yeah, it's important to also manage the load. You don't want to be coming into the competition when you're not so fresh. So make sure that week leading up to it that you don't overdo it. And this is a good time in your training because if it's your first competition, chances are you're not a very experienced competitor, and that usually means you're lower in the belts particularly. So that means your training overall, you haven't done too much of it. So it's important that that bit of training that you get in always makes a big difference, because when you're just starting out, any extra sessions, it's actually a big percentage of your overall training age. So the more training sessions you can get in the run-up, the better it is obviously for you. And what you want to do there, and particularly with the sparring, is maybe work on some of the techniques or strategies you hope to employ at the competition. And as well as that, you want to, as you said, Adrian, hit that intensity with your patterns. You want to be going out with full power, practicing how to compete at that high level over multiple rounds. You don't want to just give it one good go on your pattern and then be burnt out for your next round. So you want to be able to prepare to be able to deliver that intensity, whether it's a sparring or it's the pattern competition that you're preparing for.
Yeah, and with that in mind, let's jump into the idea of physical preparation. So what we're talking about here is, can you make it so that your training is overall starting to dial in and be really suited and really accurate to the type of performance that you're going to deliver. So with the pattern, you're just preparing to do round after round at a high level of focus and intensity. Concentration is probably a bigger factor than, for especially for people who are doing their first couple of competitions. The ability to concentrate and maintain your focus and power and hand speed throughout a full pattern round after round is going to be a big deal. And you'll surprise yourself how often in training you let your concentration slip. You let things drop 5% or 10% off your best, and that can really impact your performance, because you do in competition what you've done in training. You don't all of a sudden develop a better than ever performance when it comes to the competition. You'll probably, if anything, be a little bit off your best. So prepare with that in mind and push harder in relation to your patterns training before the competition, in the hopes that you can deliver a really solid performance on the day. Sparring then, a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. You want to be preparing a different way. You need your focus is actually very important as well for the sparring, but a lot of times you'll be a bit nervous, which is normal, which means a little bit of an adrenaline dump will happen from time to time, especially in the legs. So you need to be making sure that you get yourself a good warm-up on the day of the competition, but in the preparation leading up to it, you want to make sure that you're getting good training, good sparring matches, good rounds potentially, and that you're also making sure that you are getting enough rounds to be fit enough to go and compete, and also that you have your nutrition dialed in and things like that. Probably not the best idea to be eating a pizza the night before and then you have a weigh-in the next morning to hit or whatever.
For sure.
So be aware of the constraints as well, whether your division is height if you're a little bit younger, or whether it's weight generally if you're a teen or adult. So it's important to be aware of that as well, to make sure that you're hitting those correctly on the correct time for check-in.
Yeah, and I think just when it comes to the sparring, that key thing of make sure that you're doing some amount of time at the full round length and at the full match intensity, in the run up to it. So whether it's a 90-second or a 2-minute round or 2-minute rounds, you know what it feels like, and you're able to pace yourself and time yourself to go at a level of intensity that you can match. There is a phrase that pretty much fear and fatigue are effectively the same thing when it comes to sparring competition. So once you start to feel that fatigue and you know it's not going away and you feel your performance slip, it causes your confidence to drop. You start to, show a little bit of fear. You're not as strong as you would otherwise be. So the better physically prepared you can be, the more confident you're going to be when you get into it.
Yeah, because I think one of the big things that I notice with people who compete first, whether it's patterns, they come out the blocks and they're flying around the place and they're not used to the speed they come out because their heart rate is going so fast. And we'll get into the mental side in a while. So it's important to be getting that balance between amped up enough to perform with a good intensity, also not being overly kind of exaggerating the heartbeat and stuff like that where you go too fast. If you do that, then you're going to be flying through your pattern and you're going to have a way higher chance of making a mistake or forgetting a movement or making an error. And the same goes for sparring as well. It's good to have that balance between ready for a good intensity and also being relaxed enough that you can be composed to flow and go through your techniques that you want to go through and not be going in there without your brain attached to your body, let's say.
So with that mental preparation in mind, I think one of the things that you've mentioned earlier, but it's really, really critical, is that idea of the warm-up. So whether it's patterns or sparring, you should already know what your warm-up is going to be, and that's going to put you in a good mental place for the competition event. So if it's patterns, getting 8 or 10 repetitions at high power of the pattern that you're going to perform. And if it's sparring, getting some hitting done with a partner, getting somebody you're used to and comfortable with working with, whether it's your coach or a training partner, will really, really help you get to the point where you're not as much at risk of that adrenaline dump that you were talking about, to where you've already got a sweat on, you've already been hit a few times, you're not going to panic the first time you get hit, you'll be a bit more comfortable in the ring, and it really does help your mental preparation to have a good physical preparation planned before the event starts. What other kind of things are we talking about in mental preparation?
Yeah, for the mental preparation, it's important to know that there's not that many things you can actually control. So the less energy and mental capacity you can give to those, the better. So things like the score, the referee, the size of your opponent, the belt of your opponent, which actually doesn't matter at all, but beginners think that that's a massive thing. These are all things that are out of your control. So the best thing you can do is focus on the things that you want to bring to the match. Okay, so are you looking to lead off with your legs more? Are you looking to close the distance, get your hands? And these things with a higher work rate is the best way you can focus on your own performance. So that's the way to go, and I think it's the best solution for your first competition, because people tend to drive themselves a little bit mad and think about these things too much and over exaggerate the whole event. So just try to relax, enjoy it, and get out there and try to do your job. Remember, the other person has to deal with the problems you bring to them as well. So try to go out there and be the person who isn't really thinking too much about the whole event and is able to bring their best performance.
Okay, so with the event itself, we want to kind of look a little bit at the idea of event preparation. And for me, sometimes this starts with the simplest of things, like packing your bag. So, the day before the event or earlier, if you're traveling a little bit, you want to make sure that you have all the appropriate equipment in that bag. So that is your dubuck, your belt, your sparring equipment, double checking that you have your gum shield in there, because that's a hard one to replace on the day. Very often tournaments might have a shop, or there'll be teammates that you could borrow the other equipment from, but no one is going to give you their gum shield, and they wouldn't fit if they did anyway. So make sure that one is in there. That's also the one the coaches never want to hear of. Oh, I've lost my gum shield. There's very little that we can do about that on the day, so make sure you have that packed. Secondly, are you going to be able to get food at the arena or water at the arena? You definitely, no matter where you're going in the world, you want to pack some with you. And then it's just a bonus if you've got a nice restaurant or a good outlet there that you can top up at. Travel. So if you're going to have to travel to the event, Are you going to have to sit in your car and drive for several hours to get there? Are you going to be overnighting the day before? So some of these decisions can make it, particularly for adults, it can make it a lot easier if you can drive up the night before the event, be relaxed, get there after a good night's sleep. Whereas sometimes if you have to drive 3 or 4 hours in the morning of the event, it's going to be a tough, long day. So particularly for the longer running competitions where you might not be starting your sparring until 4 or 5 in the evening. So, that's just something to consider. Look at the layout of the competition, figure out when is best to travel, and try to help yourself if you can.
Yeah, and we already spoke about the rules, but it's important as well to understand the rules in terms of equipment, because each competition is different. They may allow a certain type of glove, they may require you to wear shin guards, others may not, etc.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand the rules there as well, that you don't get caught in the hop when you arrive to the event and you've realized, oh, I don't have this particular bit of equipment that is necessary to compete.
So maybe you also were talking a little bit just in terms of the categories for sparring in particular, because, in Ireland and within our own competitions up to the age of 13, we go by height for the sparring category, and there really is nothing you can do to manage your height. So you are where you are. But weight is one of those things that also causes a little bit of consternation. And if it is your first tournament, I would say you want to just ignore that. You make sure you enter at the weight that you walk around at. Let everything else take care of itself and not stress about that at all. As you gain a bit more experience, you might look and say, hey, I'm 2 kilos above this category. I might drop myself down or mind what I'm eating in the couple of weeks beforehand and reach that lower category. But generally speaking, if it's your first few competitions, do yourself a favor and take off that mental load. Just enter yourself at the weight that you walk around at and you'll have a much happier experience.
Absolutely. You're not looking for the world title in your first couple of competitions, obviously, so don't worry about that too much. Get in there, try to make the most of the experience and have a good performance should be your goal. And if you're worried about weight and then your energy is down, etc., that's just another, as you said, another mental load that you have to bear, and that's not ideal, so you don't want that. So make sure, as well, for us in ITF Taekwondo and sparring, weight is not something that's as important as like wrestling or maybe some grappling sports where size does matter that little bit more because their weight is bearing on you and you have to carry their weight. In ITF, the only real difference is somebody maybe physically bigger, which means they have a little bit more reach.
Yeah.
So other than that, that's a good thing to get in there as well and experience different heights and different reaches, because that's going to improve your sparring skills moving forward.
Yeah, and speaking of kind of goals and improving your sparring skills, let's get onto the idea of mindset and goals for a competition. And I think especially if it's your first competition, this is where you can do yourself an awful lot of favors, because remember, Richie's already talked about the fact that there are only so many things you can control, and you cannot control the draw, you cannot control who your opponents are going to be, what their skill set is, etc. So you can't set yourself a goal of winning a gold, a silver, or a bronze medal, whatever it happens to be in your first competition. So don't put that extra strain or stress on yourself, because in the end, that's something that's out of your control. Winning or losing is kind of out of your control to that degree. You can only control your performance. So with that in mind, what would you do to set a good mindset and establish appropriate goals for a competition, Richie?
Yeah, so realistically, there's 3 things that you should be aiming to do in terms of your mindset and your goals. Number 1, you should aim to have a very high work rate. What does that mean? It means that you don't want to go in the ring and kind of settle to be the person who's not working the hardest. It doesn't mean you go in there and go gung-ho and go absolutely crazy. It means that the other person just doesn't outwork you. Very simple. The second thing is your mindset. So whether that's you make a mistake in your pattern or whether that's you get scored on in sparring, that you don't leave that affect you moving forward, that you're able to very quickly tune that out of your brain and focus on the job at hand. Because no matter what you're doing, you need to be very present no matter what form of competition you're doing, and that's very, very important. So if you're thinking about the last 10 seconds or 20 seconds that's just gone by, there's even more of a chance that you're going to make a bigger mistake again. Yeah. And then finally, make sure your preparation is good. Like you said already, the things you need to bring, the preparation with the warm-up, food, drink, etc. By hitting the 3 of these boxes, it puts you in a great position to perform really, really well, and hopefully you come out with a medal and a successful performance. If not, it doesn't really matter. People aren't going to remember it next week anyway. You always think that when you're in the ring, everyone's looking at you. It's not the case. People are very much consumed with their own business. So don't worry about it too much. Life goes on. It's not the end of the world. Prepare, do your best. If you win, great. If you lose, no problem. Take the lessons that you get from that and move on to the next one. It should be a long-term thing here when you compete, not about your just event in its single purpose.
Yeah, and just to riff off of something you just said there, Richie, where it starts where you arrive to the competition and you're worrying that everybody there is looking at you. And the ideal is that over years of growing in your performance and in your mindset, that you're going to the competition and going, oh, look, everyone is here to see me. And it's the same thing, but with a different mindset on it. That everyone is looking at me, exposes you, everyone's here to see me, elevates you, and really is about, earning that mindset over time through the competitions.
Absolutely. There's a lot of research done on sports psychology that says the difference between people who visualize competition as a threat, like you said there as an example of a threat state, versus a challenge state where you say, okay, I want to go here and try to do my best and see how well I can do. There's massive research which leads to the person who has the challenge mindset to perform much, much better overall when it comes to competition in any sport. So that's something important to remember.
So folks, that's it from us for this week. But if you have a first competition experience that you'd like to share, or you have some questions and you're thinking of going to your first competition, maybe you've never been involved in competition before, or even just trying to improve your mindset, your goals, or your performance in competition, again, drop a comment down below, add us to any of our social media, and we will definitely get back to you, or we'll develop on that concept in another video. So thanks for staying with us this week, and we'll see you next Friday.
See you in the next one.